you're measuring backwards to plan forward, which is what you should be doing, and you see yourself on 1 week doing, a run on one day with a specific load that's 40 minutes. And then the next week the plan calls for 45. But you missed your Monday run, so it seems perfectly logical to add that run onto this one because you got to make it up. So now that 45-minute run becomes an hour and 15. To most athletes, that makes sense. But it is the worst possible thing you can do. And guess what, guys? It makes absolutely zero sense.
Happy Thursday, buddy.
Yeah, dude, we're way off right now.
I almost said Memorial Day.
I know, it's like, yeah, we had that, but we did it on Sunday, so it wasn't really Memorial Day, and we usually have been doing early morning day of casts, but due to some scheduling conflicts and just overall busyness of life, we got to knock this out on Wednesday. So we'll be ready to rock morning of for everyone listening, and hey, that's the kind of things we do for you people.
It's nonstop.
It's nonstop. It's every Monday and Thursday, even though we may not record as such. And we are, 271 deep as of right now, or 272?
This is 272. We just
272.
keep grinding like it's a Ultraman or something.
Like it's an Ultraman. Yeah. We'll tell you what, dude. We're gonna be like sneaking up on 300 before we know it.
Oh, I know.
Which is crazy to kind of think of when you and I started this journey, that we'd even get to 300 podcasts, or that we'd even have people even semi interested in the consistency of us, doing those besides just a general conversation between the two of us.
Who would have thought? An age grouper talking to his coach. A lot more people are listening lately, so I think people like it or something. Must be liking it, and so feel free to tell your friends.
Yeah, they were. No, I remember back when I told Allie we were going to do this when we were living in Kansas City. She was supportive, obviously, but I think in one of those like, hey, I think I'm going to take up, rebuilding model cars kind of like attitude.
Oh, no.
That sounds cute. That's not going to last. Good luck with that. I'm going to be totally supportive of you because that's what spouses do. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is not going to last. Kind of like when it's kind of one of those things. I mean, she's always super supportive, but consistency is something that's just two things. Consistency and availability are the two biggest, barriers to people being able to produce things on a regular basis, whether it's a podcast like we're doing or blogging or working out or eating right. It's all about availability and the willingness to be consistent. And, besides breathing air and being sober, and committing to that, this is the most consistent thing I've ever been at. And I think I know for sure it's the most consistent thing you've ever been at. But yeah, sure. It's be 3 years this October. It's been awesome. A really great ride. We've met a ton of awesome people. And podcast 272. Happy to be here. I've got loads of thoughts, but I've been really kind of like purged with thoughts lately about great topics and stuff. But I'm not training near as much as you are. You're kind of on the back end of Chattanooga 70.3, and as I kind of mentioned over the swim camp, you've been kind of feeling yourself lately. You got a little fire in the belly for Ironman Wisconsin. So tell me let's clue the audience in on how things are going with you and how you're feeling and where you see things going next for your next big training cycle.
It's so interesting. How we always think that we're reading each other's minds. And
sometimes.
You always say that.
Yeah, a lot of times, for sure.
But
half our podcast things we both think of like independently, and then we end up talking about the same subject that's kind of been on our mind.
So I was thinking before the cast that I'm simultaneously in the best shape of my life, triathlon-wise, I think, or pretty close, and probably on the edge of fatigue. So, Yeah, because like yesterday, dude, I was just out of it. I mean, I still got a little spin in, but I mean, I just feel really good on one hand, and then yesterday, I think it's just because of the 70.3, and then I kind of stuck with it, and then we had a swim camp, and not like, I'm not saying it was like an endless grind or anything like that, but it just feels like, there's just a lot going on, and we're trying to do a lot of things, so mentally that has been I guess a wearing thing too. So, but I feel really good physically, but mentally I'm trying to simplify the air. How's that?
I think that's a good way to put it. How do you think? And this is affecting basically everyone in a majority of the 50 states right now. But how do you feel like the heat is affecting you in your training right now? Because I know it's affecting many people's training right now, and it is a really, really difficult time to transition from, because it's kind of like we just kind of skip the 80s. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, even though it's like, the best generation, I'm an 80s guy, but we basically, temperature wise, at least here in the South, we basically just skip the 80s. It's like, hey, we're chilling in the 70s, weather's great, this is perfect, having a good time. Hello 90s.
I know, we didn't know Duran. We just went straight over it.
No Ace of Base. No. And we just went. It was just straight mid 90s, straight to Boys to Men. But it has been blazing hot, and it's really is almost impossible to go for like a legit run and stay in zone 2 with any elevation change like hill stuff without going in what people would say is your zone 3. It's just really hard, and it takes. The thing about it is it's so frustrating, yet it kind of defeats you almost, because you're seeing all these fitness gains and you go run in the heat and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting slower. This is so hard. So you don't want to go into it anymore because it makes you feel slow and it just wipes you out. So you don't do it, and then you don't acclimate to it. So you really just keep, putting yourself in that situation once a week or twice a week. But in the reality is you just really kind of need to spend 2 to 3 weeks of consistent exposure to this heat and taking things easy with no expectations other than what I'm doing is still helping me, even though the numbers might not reflect that this is me gaining fitness. Mm-hmm. It is still working in your favor. And I think that's another thing that athletes struggle with is they always want to see a huge benefit in what they're doing day to day. But with heat, guess what, guys? You're going to be slower. And if you're out running 9-minute miles on your regular, and you're doing it in a fairly tempered climate, 70s, and then you go into where it's mid 90s for 2 weeks straight, guess what? That same pace that was maybe a zone 2 feel is now going to feel like a zone 3 feel at a slower pace, higher heart rate. And when you get done, remember I always talk about most runs and rides or whatever should make you feel at least somewhat refreshed. Guess what? The heat ain't going to make you feel refreshed. It's going to take you longer to recover. You'll probably see an increase in leg soreness. So there's just a lot of things in terms of the amount of stress that it puts on your body, and I think that definitely may be part of the extra fatigue that you're probably carrying coming off the back of a really well done race at Chattanooga 70.3, and then not taking the usual time off that you usually take, which is at least a week of just kind of chilling out. You mm-hmm. were so ready to go that I think you probably ran a little bit too quick and hop back into things. But I think the heat has a lot to do with most people's not necessarily frustration, but kind of the extra amount of fatigue that they're feeling right now as their body tries to adapt to a totally different temperature for the rest of the summer.
Yep. I think also too, I came out of that race, I was joking about it a lot, but I said, man, I think I've had pizza 5 out of 7 days. And I think the high of a race and just the general, and I actually felt pretty good after that. Maybe better than I ever have after a race, as far as the next day, limping around, moving around, and I felt pretty good about it. And then 3 days in, I tried to go for that little jog, and my knee felt a little bit wanky, and so yesterday or 2 days ago, I actually went out for my first run since the race, and I felt really good. But I kept it in this shaded area,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt pretty good. But I ended up probably going further than I should have for the first run after a race like that. But the thing, my ride, I think it was yesterday, was interesting because you're talking about this zone 2 feels like zone 3 or whatever effort. I actually called that ride yesterday a zone 2 nudge.
Zone 2 nudge.
Yeah, because me, I didn't have my power going. I didn't have any of the heart rate stuff going. I just went on feel, and I go out to the lab, and let me just ask a quick question. What is with the wind this time? Is the wind more these days, or am I just imagining that?
It was a couple years ago. Nashville was actually ranked like in the top 2 windiest cities in America.
Okay. Well, it seems like I've always known that, especially when we go out to this abandoned airfield that we call the lab, and it's always windy out there, and I always cherish it in sort of this weird way. It's sort of a gift, but it's painful at the same time because every time, it's a half mile into the wind, and then you go with the wind and whatever. But so I have this sort of like, okay, I'm going to try and go at this pace for 30 minutes, and it felt pretty easy, but it's so hot out there, dude. And we had the swim camp, and I was thinking about this, and while I wasn't doing much of anything out there, we were standing in sun and heat for 3-ish hours. That I wasn't used to any of that, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, I was, I suppose, from that race, but then, you go out and try and ride and try to keep it in your zone 2, but I was calling it a zone 2 nudge because, frankly, I was probably pushing harder than I thought, and, I just was overdoing it a little bit, and it should have been an easy recovery ride. And
It's that
add up.
It's that balance of of why like having a good understanding of your perceived exertion and how that's feeling to you in every moment under multiple conditions is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And why if you try to overextend or chase a pace that you think is like your zone 2, then it's like, so let's say I put, I'm taking Mike Tarrolly and I'm going to put him in 45-degree weather with a light breeze and sunshine. Your zone 2 RP for like a zone 2 feel or like a 4 out of 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 might be an 830. But then if I take that exact human being, you, and I put you over the next day and you fly across the country and you end up smack dab in the middle of, wherever, Florida, and it's 98 with no wind and the humidity, and what's often not talked about is the dew point, which can absolutely crush your soul. And I ask you to run zone 2, and it's more than likely after, your first 10 minutes before your body gets really, set into the exposure and the heat and the dew point and starts, suffering, you might be like in the high 8s. But by the end of the run, if you're being honest and you're staying within that feel, your pace is going to be significantly slower.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've actually posted this, at least in our closed active athlete group before, about the effect that heat and the dew point has on your pace. And it gets up to where like anything over, I think, 70 is a significant effect on your pace, on a correlating perceived effort scale. So that's where people tend to get in trouble, especially this time of year when it's hard, when they judge themselves based on this is my pace and I have to run it. Well, if that's the case, then your 8:30 at 45 degrees is going to basically have no toll on you. And if you go out and run and the way you've structured your training, your coach has structured your training, or the training plan you're following has you doing a zone 2, and the temperature is different, and there's the dew point's high and the heat is high and the humidity's crazy, and you try and chase that pace because that is your quote unquote zone 2 pace, then the RPE for that's going to be a 7, 8, or maybe even 9 by the end of it, depending on the terrain as well. So the next day when you're supposed to be feeling refreshed and ready to go, guess what? You're going to feel trashed.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've compromised the rest of the week by just for the sake of not listening to your body. And I get it, because going out and doing these things in the heat is incredibly humbling. And again, that's also a reason why so many people stay away from it, or they'll retreat to, like I have a general rule of thumb. all your zone 1, zone 2 runs right now this time of year, they all need to be outside. They all need to be chill, and you just need to let the pace fall where they are. If you're doing a really high quality session with maybe some intervals or something like that, hop on the treadmill and do them. Get a good quality effort out of it. But on the other runs, get the exposure in, because the sooner you get it done and get it out of the way, the better. Because then you're going to be able to continuously do it throughout the rest of the summer. When, if you're out there and you're training right now, guess what? You probably got races coming up, and those races are probably not going to be, on the outskirts of Canada where it's still 40, and you're going to need to be heat acclimated. So, as much as it sucks, and as much as it's humbling, and as much as you're going to hate seeing, your heart rate go up for, which would not be normal for the watts you're putting out of the bike, or you're going to see your heart rate go up while your pace goes down and gets slower on your regular runs. Get used to it. And then because I think an athlete that I have in Texas, mentioned, that's a great point. It's like, summer running leads to outstanding fall running. Because running in the heat, we've talked about this before on multiple podcasts, that there are a lot of studies out there that running in the heat and heat acclimation and running is actually shown to have a lot of better results for athletes than altitude. And so you're going to see huge benefits. You just have to trust that the adaptation and the changes are going on in your body that you believe are outside of having to chase a pace that you see is the only way to digest that you're actually gaining fitness. Or most athletes' thing is not just gaining fitness. It's am I still maintaining this fitness? Because if I go out running and even look slower, then guess what? I think I'm just getting slower.
Right.
Which is totally not how things work.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the weird things is that when I feel like this, I feel like my body actually, like I said, feels pretty good. I don't think there's something going on fatigue-wise, and I think a lot of times I have a tendency to be like, oh, I'm going out for an easy zone 2 ride or run or whatever, and I neglect the nutritional part of that, especially now, or hydration, a little bit, maybe. It's like, I can make it. You kind of start doing that, and that sort of snowballs into something probably not so good for you. But the other thing is, like, when you're feeling this way, nothing really makes me feel better than going for a run. So it's like during that run, you're kind of energized again, but I think it kind of, like I said, it layers on top of each other, and it sort of creates an accumulative fatigue that is dicey if you're pushing it too hard. So it's like we want to get out and we want to move, because sitting around makes us kind of like blah mentally.
It's avoidance is really what it comes down to.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of like avoiding the heat for 1 or 2 days because it's too hot, do you think it's going to cool down the rest of the year? Because I also think, like we talked about this a couple months ago, when we talked about go through like testing, like you're going through like spring and summer, and you've been outside, you're doing all your training outside, and then when you transition to inside, it's probably a good time to do some specific testing, because the environment's going to totally change. You might be inside a ton, you might be on the trainer some or all the time. So a lot of people have a significant difference in the wattage they put out on their trainer versus the outside. And it could be something that's like a 20 watt difference, which is huge. And you don't want them chasing that same number inside. The same thing can be said for as you're transitioning from, hey, we just totally forgot about spring in the 80s and hello 90s. Your body is the same, but its reaction to the environment and the stimulus that you're about to put on it for the next 2, 3. So, Wisconsin for you is like September, so 3 or 4 months away, is going to be substantial. And you can really dig yourself a hole by 2 ways. One, avoiding it totally, which is what a lot of athletes are going to do. I'm just going to run inside, or I'm not going to run in it at all, or I'll run in it like once a week, when really that's just going to make that once a week run miserable. Because just like consistency is king in basically all things, well, so that's the same can be true for acclimating to specific temperatures, whether it's something super hot or something super cold. And so they're totally going to avoid it, or they're going to go out, and so that's going to dig them a hole later. they're not going to be able to apply to it, then they're going to probably chase it 2 weeks out from a race and figure out that, oh, now's a good time to start heat acclimating.
Probably not.
When, it's definitely the worst time. Or they're going to hop out the door and try to get quote unquote heat acclimated by, going out at 3 o'clock every day and running sprints. Or chasing a pace and not watching their perceived effort, not being honest with themselves about how they feel, and they're going to dig a massive hole. Because you're going to be I think most people would. I think they could be honest and objective and say, like, when you go out for your first really, really hot run, it's, and if it's like 30 to 40 minutes and you're going easy, when you get back, there is a significant difference in the recovery period that it's going to take you to feel normal again. Like, you can go grab a shower, your body's still hot, you're still burning calories, your core temp is still jacked up. And it's going to take you a while to feel like you're going to be shelled. And you're thinking, God, like, this really sucks. I don't want to do that again. So then you're going to put it off more. And instead of just like, you know what? Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and soak it up these next 2 to 3 weeks and just acclimate as quickly as I possibly can with the fitness that I have, and not just avoid things or approach it in a manner that's going to end up being more of a negative than an ultimate positive.
I thought about an indicator as to how intense my workout has been. When I come back, if Maddie goes aggressively after my sweat legs, like her level of intensity.
Oh yeah,
probably can tell me how hard I worked out. And I'm not a huge sweater, but like the other day I came back, man, I was just pouring. Like you're saying, that is such a great point about how you just know that you're done, but that body is still on fire for a long time and burning calories, and just like that's why it's so important to to replenish and probably get in some cool temperatures and shower and like get all that stuff done. Because I don't know though, you've done saunas before, like as an acclimational thing. Have you had good success with that? My gut tells me that's probably the same thing. Is like you have to kind of be consistent with it and do it over a long time, because you can't just do it in a week or two.
Yeah, or you can't even do it 3 times a week. Like you need to do it more times than not, to see a pattern and see it improve. And you want to do it, right after a session where your core temp's really, really high. Like going to a sauna when you drove there in air conditioned car, and you walked in the Y and you changed, and you went right into the sauna. You're going to last for 20, you can last for 20 minutes. Like, man, I can last for a long time. But that's only because your core temp was starting at a state of being regular and being somewhat cooled. The best time to do sauna training is after a run or after a ride. Somewhat after a swim, but your core temp is going to be very hot, obviously, from a swim, because you're going to having been in somewhat cool water. Well, I guess that's dependent on the YMCA you go to. Some of them are like 93. So you want to hop in the sauna when your core temp is already risen, and then let the adaptation occur like that, and let your body adapt that way. Another, there are also a ton of studies of like just taking general, like, everybody's like all about these, cold cryotherapy, ice things. Like those are actually, really, really great for you. The studies actually say that if you really want great adaptation, go take a hot shower or a hot bath.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to have the same effect in terms of it's not going to, what a lot of people say, oh, I need to cool my body to recover quicker, which again, recovery is important, but you also don't want to cheat your body from having to do the work to let things adapt. You don't want to cheat that system. And what taking a hot bath or hot shower does, and again, it continues to teach your body how to raise its core temp and then deal with it in a better manner to where you don't get so shelled. Sometimes in the past when I've been training for really hot races, I'll go for a run, super, super relaxed, super chill, get in the heat, and then I'll go for a walk afterwards to quote unquote cool down. So my body temp is still going to be up, my core temp is still going to be up. I'm walking, which to me is something I like to do after a run. Is just good recovery, I think. to let things loosen up a little bit. But I'm also still getting exposed to, I'm continuing to sweat. I'm still getting exposed to the sun. I'm still putting myself in that atmosphere that's going to be really, really hard on my body while not running for an extra 2 miles where I might end up trashed. And just general, like I found some of the, I think this is going to be right up your alley. It's like a Mike Tarrolly theory.
Oh, good.
I have found the best results I've ever had in hot races have been in the summer, where I have in the spring, where I have purposefully done extensive yard work. That's such a Mike Troy theory. When I've done my workouts in the morning to get, because the ultimate goal for all of us, and if you're listening more, your goal is to gain fitness. You can get faster and do bigger and better things and get better time. So the goal is always fitness. And where kind of the rub is on all of this is that you don't want to compromise your ability to gain fitness too, because you do reach a point of diminishing return to where you don't get, like, you might want to give yourself like a badge of honor for going out and running in 105 degree heat, but like doing that all year round, once you're finally acclimated, like, you're just not going to be able to run hard enough to also see in certain points and do intervals at certain points to where you're going to be able to get quote unquote faster and fitter. So don't get me wrong, like, there is a point of diminishing returns to where you're never going to be able to tax your system hard enough from an anaerobic standpoint with your legs and your body and your lungs and your heart. You're just not going to be able to do it because it's going to be so hot, and you won't be able to do it because recovery is also extensive and it demands so much of your body after. So again, there is an extreme, and there's a point of diminishing returns once it gets to be really, really hot, like 105 all the time and just brutal. But in the past, when I've done, like, I might have like a really high quality trainer ride or something, like I can't go for a long ride. I'll do it on the trainer or even a long run early in the morning, and then I'll spend the majority of the rest of the day outside, doing yard work and just generally exposing yourself to the elements. And I think that is, because it's funny that you'll even have all of athletes say, like, I did yard work today and I am absolutely shelled. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's because of like the nature of the physical activity they were doing by doing the yard work, but a lot of times it's just the fact that, like you said, like, you're outside. And that's why I think camps, like the first year you and I did camps 3 years ago, I remember I was spent for like 2 weeks, and it wasn't so much about the the talking and the having to be on the whole time and the obviously like the training. It was the fact that we were outside in the elements in 90 degree heat for 3 to 4 days straight. And it just really takes a toll on you if you're not prepared for it. And so I think that is something that needs to be addressed, in that, you need to do carefully and thoughtfully. But once you make that decision to go for it and apply yourself, you have to be, like you said, you have to be consistent with it. You can't go for 2 runs a week that are 30 minutes long and expect to get acclimated. You're just gonna continually expose yourself to being hot, and it's just gonna suck for the rest of the year. You might generally adapt to it over time, but you're not gonna adapt to it the way you want to. Like, if you're gonna head to a race, like, a lot of athletes head up to Muncie or Ohio, where it can be just absolutely scorching. And if you're coming from inside to do that, and you're gonna have an elevated heart rate on the bike, or just basically from the time you step out of your hotel room, your swim heart rate's going to be jacked up because everything's going to be warmer. Your bike heart rate and effort's going to be up to maintain a specific speed or effort or power output. They're going to hop onto the run, and if you don't have any exposure, you haven't done the work to acclimate yourself to that, then you are going to suffer greatly. And it's not going to be a true reflection of where your fitness really is, because again, fitness isn't just about your physical ability. It's about your ability to express that fitness via execution and preparation. And heat is an element of that. Mm-hmm. And you also see it in the inverse you saw it in Boston 2 years ago. The hardened athletes in the cold weather dominated. where the ones that, like the traditionally, like some of the athletes from different continents who aren't going to be exposed to running in the teens and the 20s in these crazy crappy conditions, they absolutely fell apart. And so again, like, it's both ends of the spectrum, and it's always about, you can have fitness, and that's great, but when all things are equal with fitness, it comes down to those other areas of preparation and then race execution. That is what's going to allow you to express your full potential of fitness on that day. And if you're an athlete that's got, a fitness level of 100%, but you don't prepare in the heat and you don't execute your race day to your full game plan to its full extent, then you may only get a representation that's reflective of 70%. But if you go in with, let's say 80% of your best fitness, but you go in and you're totally adapted to the temperature, and you've done all of the heat acclimation you need to do, and you execute your game plan perfectly, more than likely you're going to beat that other guy who's got the 100% fitness but chose to prepare and execute poorly in the previous two. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? I just think it's really overlooked when people say, fitness is it, but it's the race day is your opportunity to express it, and it has to go through so many other filters to be able to express it and get the direct feedback that you deserve based on the work that you've put in.
Mm-hmm. And I think that may be one of the most generally underrated points of doing triathlon, because even if it's a perfect day in the mid-70s or something like that, the odds are that most of us haven't acclimated ourselves to this thought of going out and say it's a half, riding hard for 56, relatively hard for 56 miles, and then getting off that bike and feeling that temperature when you go out to run a half marathon, and certainly in a full. I mean, you're like, what percentage of people are actually trained up to do that? Like, that's the whole thing about holding back on the bike or, riding smart, is that most of us just aren't ready to do what we do that day. Mm-hmm. Because we're not trained up to that level, and so all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're going to put this kind of level of fatigue or stress on your body in, perfect conditions in the 70s, but mm-hmm. you're going to come off that bike hotter than you've ever been starting a run before, probably in training or close to it, and then all of a sudden, you're going to try and run harder than you have been. It's meltdown time.
It is. I mean, and it is why, like, and again, I think that's like one of the bigger arguments sometimes when people talk about Kona is as a world championship. If it's about exposure to heat, some of the greatest athletes in the world just don't do well in heat. That's just the way they don't. They just don't. But if you put them on, if Ironman World Championships move from Kona to Ironman Wales, and it could be 35 degrees or 40 degrees on race day, I bet you would see, let's say you took all the pro athletes on the planet and you threw them at Kona, on the same day with the exact same fitness level, and they all executed to their exact potential, that the standings on Kona, and if you took them all and you picked them up and you're fresh and they all got back, started zero, and they did the same exact fitness, the same exact game plans at a place like Ironman Wales in like 40 degrees, the standings would be totally different. And so again, like that's one of the arguments about the Kona, that it's always the same conditions all the time. But it's something that this time of year is, again, it's like, and that's why when people chase paces or chase miles per hour on the bike and on the run, that as their gold standard or as their goal race pace, they are eliminating the opportunity to troubleshoot on what's going to allow them the best shot for race day. And then they're going to blame it on the heat. When, is the heat going to impact your ability to perform your best overall race time-wise? Sure, but so is the course. So is the elevation. So is the swim. So, I mean, it's all different. So is like, even down to something as simple as where's your rack in transition? Take the exact same person, the exact same day, and the exact same course, and they have the worst possible transition place possible versus the greatest one right by the exit. It might be like a 2-minute difference or a PR. So like there's like, yeah, it's, you can blame it on the heat. And again, the heat is always a factor because everything is a factor. But race day isn't about, it's honestly, it's rarely about your best fitness day, period, because that means everything has to line up perfect. It has to be perfect cool temps, no wind, no waves in the water, wetsuit legal, best transition rack, cool temps on the run with a light breeze, nobody gets in your way, and everything goes perfect. And guess what? That probably ain't never going to happen. And, there are a few courses where it's more likely to happen. Like maybe an Ironman Arizona, where it can be windy, but it's usually a pretty cool and perfect day almost. But more often times than not, it's race day is, yes, it's a reflection of your fitness, but it's also about your ability to execute against those conditions on that course on that day. And that is where so many people get in trouble, not just on the bike when they overbike, it's how they approach the run and come out too hot and too fast. It's an overall expression, not a momentary story. And so many times that you get married to, and this is so many things in life too, like that we refuse to let go, or we refuse to give in and say, you know what, and let's just scrap it. This game plan or this idea or this project, this just ain't working. But so many times we'll just hold on for dear life because we've attached ourselves to this ending that we want so bad that we would rather blow up and go up in flames chasing it than to readjust on the fly and be objective and say, you know what, that's not going to work, and I don't really know why I made that goal in the first place, but I can make a slight adjustments and make this a really, really great day given the opportunity that I have, the fitness, the environment, and how I'm going to play my cards. Because triathlon and racing is so much like being in a card table too. You can have the worst hand ever, but if you play it right, you might make it to the end, and you can probably bluff your way.
I was going to say you're going to bluff it.
Yeah, I mean, but
you can fool yourself.
Exactly, but there's so many. Again, like there's so many things to think about it and how you approach things, and again, it's like that like chasing those goals and the heat thing is like another, like the guy that I was talking about in our Memorial Day podcast, the JamesClear.com, who had talked about habits, is the way I got into that article was an article before that was shared, and it was called "The Best Way to Measure Progress is to Measure Backwards, Not Forwards." And oftentimes we just set our goals by basically looking ahead at what we want and how we want to get there, when what we really should do is look backwards, look at our last week, look at how we did, and then make incremental adjustments for the next week. And racing is the ultimate trap in terms of, I gotta qualify for Kona, I want to make it on the podium, I gotta go sub 5. So in order to do that, I gotta get into TriCalc and I gotta do X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to plan my training accordingly to plan it forward. When the reality is that what you should be doing is you should be looking, okay, what in reality was I able to execute well last week? And then if I was able to execute last week really, really well, did I still do that the week before? And is that an indicative of the pattern and the life and the availability that I have right now in order to be able to do this again for another week? And we always talk about this in terms of, like we traditionally don't and haven't in the past, but we've discussed it, going forward is, a lot of people will buy these books or these online training plans that do like 6 months and 12 months at a time. But after 2 weeks, everything's off. Your trajectory is totally off. Something happened. And so now it's like, now everything is teetering on you planning forward instead of planning in real time or planning from the week before. It should be reactive to what you are and what you just did, not where you want to be. Because that's where you end up creating holes, and that's where you end up digging too much fatigue, because your mind says, I want this, but your body says, yeah, but hello, I ain't ready for that quite yet. And so, especially triathletes, when they force themselves into running a pace, like I just started working with an athlete, and he was talking about an experience he had with a coach previously, and they were talking about goals, and this athlete, this is kind of like the gist of how it went, was, yeah, well, one of my goals was to run a 10K pace at, a 7:10 pace. So on interval runs for the next few weeks, it was part of the runs where you had to run 6:10, and it never worked out. But that's how people function.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, and that's how people look at it. They plan forward based on results from other people and apply that to themselves, because their brain says that's what I have to have, without ever listening to their body about what's actually needed and what they can do. And I get in this argument, not so much an argument, but a good spirited conversation sometimes with the athletes I work with. They're like, well, why am I not running 23 miles? All my friends are. I'm like, yeah, well, that's because they're planning forward. You haven't shown me that you can, like for you, that would be maybe a 3.5 hour run. You haven't shown me that we can make it a couple weeks doing 2-hour runs without feeling some kind of a niggle, or you missed it, or so why would I do that to you?
Right.
It's irresponsible, and it's not safe. And again, I think coaches get trapped in that sometimes, because they look at athletes in terms of what race is next, and that's how they operate. Is we have to do this race, because if we don't do this race, then I'm not sure if our relationship is going to continue, and our relationship has to continue because that's how I make my livelihood. And so again, that's why I think some coaches would tend to do that plan forward, is I just have to get you racing, you have to do something on the race day, and then hopefully it gets a PR, hopefully it's okay, and you want to keep me. But if you plan on working with these athletes for an infinite amount of time, as a relationship, as a partnership, as I'm looking out for your best interest for the long term, and if that means you don't do this race, then that's fine, because it's about long-term success and us getting there as safely and as effectively as possible, while not chasing numbers or chasing distances, and putting ourselves in the best situation to be healthy and happy all the time. And you can only do that, in my opinion, by measuring backwards, because that is truly what tells ourselves what we need to work on in reality. Because I don't know what you're going to need to work on in 6 months. You could, like, yeah. I had a best example I can give is, had an athlete earlier today who was committed to an Ironman next year. That's a totally different course, and had a totally different life last year, and all these things happen. It's like, what do you think about doing some of kind of the same plan? And I was like, that's not going to work, because I think the biggest thing that sometimes people misunderstand or get confused on, or just don't think about when in terms of, even if they want to just like, hey, Billy Joe triathlete in my training group bought a 16-week training plan, he's going to share it with me and we're all going to do it. You're all going to get totally different results. And it's because everyone's life is different. Because let's say Billy Joe loses his job his first 2 weeks. Guess what? His whole training is going to go to crap. Or let's say something difficult happened in his family and he misses. You're on a 16-week plan, and something horrible happens in your life, and you get like a little injury, or something great happens and you miss 2 weeks of training. Now where do you go? Because your first instinct is gonna be, well, it's
pick it up.
It's week 5. Yep. I gotta pick it up. I gotta pick it right. So you just skip 2 weeks of training. And so again, like, that's the rub. That's the rub with training plans and the difficulty of doing it. And that's why I've always kind of struggle sometimes with the training plan thing, is that I think you always want people to set up for success. And I think there's ways you can do that with check-ins, and stuff like that, to make sure people are on the right track and adjustments. But that's why you measure forward. That's why you measure backwards, to prepare to go forward, not planning forward by picking out a specific number and chasing it, because it just doesn't work out like that.
Yeah, I could see how you get lured into that trap so easily. Just looking at a training plan and then it's like, a lot of people do that, and they'll just be 3 weeks off, and then the next thing you know, they're just sort of right back on that plan, and then it never works out. And I'm seeing that, more and more. And I would definitely have the tendency to do that. I think I'm that type of guy. It's like, and that becomes that sort of that race thing. If you can get into that race, you push yourself harder than you ever have, and then you push yourself on that run, and then, if you're there's a certain level of, we talk about pain threshold and mental toughness or whatever. And I think a lot of people can, like, one timer get through it, or, you know what I mean, push it to the limits. But that's another factor. It's like when you come out of that race, and usually it's a full, I think, and people just never find their mojo again because of what happened that day. They weren't prepared for that day. They scaled the mountain, but it's like, this ain't for me, because it was just impatience and that looking forward thing. Yeah, can I sit here today and look 4 months out and think can I do that? Yeah, I can do that. Regardless, a lot of people just have that will, but that's just not the long-term plan, and it's certainly not the best probably thing for your body. I mean, I don't know, man. It could take months to recover from something like that if you're not ready for it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you can't even predict what's going to happen in 4 days.
Yeah.
It's like we feel like we have so much control over what happens that we can plan these things, and when, like when things don't happen or things don't happen, like I gotta do this, and and that is without question one of the most difficult aspects of coaching is getting athletes to buy into that. Like you and I's relationship, hopefully, and I feel like I do a good job of this. I might not sometimes, but our relationship isn't predicated on a race, and the starting or the beginning of our coach-athlete relationship is about progress, and it's about buying in, and it's about putting you on the best path and setting you up for success the best I can each week. And then, and I know this because I've worked with and I work with athletes who are so goal data driven, like expectations on per quarter. And I'm like, it just doesn't work like that, because there's no coach that can say, you know what, if you do X, Y, and Z for the next 12 weeks without interruption, I guarantee your pace will go from 8:20s to 7:10s, because you can't predict any of that. And so as a coach, what you have to say is, I know that's what your brain says. I know that's what traditional triathlete thought process goes is, I want to go this, or I think I can go 13 hours. Why? Where'd you even get that number? Well, I don't know. I just kind of feel like I can do it. Okay, well, that's not really a good way to like make a decision, like a thought out decision. The best way you could probably do it is, here's the deal. And I know it's not like, and it's probably like why, it's not a great sales pitch, and it's not flashy, it's not catchy. We definitely couldn't put this on like an Instagram post or sponsor it, like you see sponsored ads on Facebook from like coaches that are like, guaranteed to drop 7.5 minutes off your Olympic time. Tried and true testing with a data-driven approach that is guaranteed to do X, Y, and Z. Like, yeah, if I ever say that, then you can just know that I've like fell on way off my rocker. You can come over here and punch me in the trachea. But the conversation I'd like to have is like, listen, like, my job is to set you up for success each week, and to give you workouts that are hopefully appropriately challenging, but don't overextend you. And we build days upon weeks and weeks upon months. And if we can do that, and you can stay consistent, and your body adapts to each week, and we're able to move the needle up each week, and again, keep you consistent, then we just kind of see where we land on race day. But I can't, just because you sign on with a coach or just because you buy a training plan doesn't instantaneously change your physiology or the hours a week you have to train or training in a specific way. You just don't get brainwashed all of a sudden and you get a brand new body. Like, your body works a specific way. And so like mirroring yourself to those things is I think dangerous in a lot of ways, like you said, with burnout. And then I think just mental and emotional frustration with people that give in, that don't see results, is because they're chasing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
When I promise you, if you just do things consistently and stay healthy and you're able to stay engaged for long periods of time, you will see your best results. But I think the scariest part is for athletes is, guess what? We don't know what your best result is. But it's our job to try to get there. And it's not going to happen between today and this race in 2 months. Hopefully it goes over a period of time. And again, that's the biggest fear I think a lot of coaches have with athletes, is that they fear it's based on, it'd be like getting in a relationship, being like, all right, well, we've got this 1 weekend planned, this weekend getaway, and if it doesn't go perfect, then it's over. We're done. This sucks. I knew it. We were never meant to be, even though like everything else has gone perfectly. And so I think that's why a lot of coaches have these fears, or why they, will tend to like nudge athletes into races that they shouldn't be, is because they fear that if they don't just simply participate, then their relationship is over, which I also think is dangerous and irresponsible.
Yeah. That's like me buying a 12-week yoga shred course and not following through on any of it.
But then you go and buy like the super advanced 28-hour-a-week plan, because more is always better.
Maybe we should sell a how to follow through on a plan. Because I think most of that stuff, a lot of stuff probably would work.
So right, yeah. We are going to launch launch 2 plans. One is going to be an extensive, 70.3 Ironman plan. But before you're actually able to buy that plan, you have to buy the plan, which is here's a plan on planning to plan on how to execute your plan and actually completing the plan, with no interruptions. Because I can't tell you how many times that there are athletes that I coach that are listening, and that who you are, that I've like gotten access to the Training Peaks, and I see like 19 training plans applied in Training Peaks. I'm like, dude, I see 7 runs, 4 rides, and 2 swims on Monday. What's the deal? And then I look and I see 18-week Ironman World Champion plan purchased, and then not followed for 8 weeks. And then you see, 20-week to your fastest Oli, followed for 2 weeks, missed a couple days, purchase. 16-week Ironman, half Ironman plan. It's like, but I mean, I can joke about it because it's kind of funny, but that's just that's why like a reactive, responsive person is the best, because guess what? Like you yourself are a reactive, responsive person. And you have to be able to adapt to life and have those conversations, and then I think, like, I know I've really broken through with an athlete, or that we're going to have a great partnership. Like I got a text this morning. It was like, hey, coach, I'm going to miss my run tonight. Can you rearrange my week? Because if I do it, I'm going to totally screw it up. It's like, see, perfect. Like this is why we work. But no, like so if you're like, it's so difficult to. That's why it's so difficult to write a plan that goes like really, really far out. It can be done, but it's never going to be as done well as if it's done week to week or 2 weeks, and then adjustments or tweaks can be made based on the fact that we live on a planet where we have, limited to no control over what happens to us or how we feel, or, the amount of kids you have, or your spouse, or your, like, there's so many opportunities for interruption. Mm-hmm. And those interruptions and opportunities are what allow us to, or allow us not to, execute our plan as to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
And that's why it's difficult.
Yeah. I think it should be noted that I just did Chattanooga 70.3, and what I used was your 20-week 70.3 beginner's plan. And the reason I just picked that to see how it would go early on, and I just stuck with it. And I think partially because I talk to you every day, I have a better understanding of what to do when I do screw something up. But my whole goal with that was to sort of, this was 70.3 or 8th or whatever, and I've done a bunch. I've been around this for a while, but I wanted to err on the low side because, you can have the toughest, podium qualifying plan or whatever you want to do, but if you can't be consistent with it, it doesn't matter. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go low. I'm going to aim low here and just try to do it. And it was certainly challenging enough, and you can, make things challenging as you want to make them. Mm-hmm. But to stick with it and then really come out of it with my best 70.3 effort ever was really the whole secret there. And then, like what you talked about is like if I did miss something, I didn't automatically just put the hardest thing ever the next day to try and catch up. Mm-hmm. I just sort of stuck with it. If I missed stuff, and if you see my training plate, I just left my red in there, and it was what it was. I wasn't trying to hide things.
It's just funny to me in a way, but also makes a lot of sense when you see athletes that don't truly ever reach their potential or that are never truly healthy, is that if you're measuring backwards to plan forward, which is what you should be doing, and you see yourself on 1 week doing, a run on one day with a specific load that's 40 minutes. And then the next week the plan calls for 45. But you missed your Monday run, so it seems perfectly logical to add that run onto this one because you got to make it up. So now that 45-minute run becomes an hour and 15. That to most athletes, that makes sense. But it is the worst possible thing you can do, and guess what, guys? It makes absolutely 0 sense. 0. And let me tell you why. Let me give you a little example, and then we'll call it a day. That is like the best analogy I can give you is laying on a bed of nails versus laying on 7. The way you want to lay out training is like laying out a bed of nails. They are the purpose. Each nail has a specific purpose, laid out perfectly to distribute everything evenly. And if you lay on it and your whole body is distributed on those nails perfectly, then what happens? You're able to lay on it, right? Because the nails are pretty much close to the exact same length. If you even made 7 of those nails twice as long, what would happen?
Yeah,
you wouldn't be able to. It would hurt. You wouldn't be able to lay down probably. Or if you removed half the nails and then made them longer, you wouldn't be able to lay down. But athletes think that that's how volume works. That's not how volume works. It's not because in that case, then if I asked you a 16-hour a week, then tell me this: would 2 8-hour days be the same as spreading it out evenly over 7? No. So stop making stupid decisions and thinking that I have to get this in when the reality is you probably didn't get it in on Monday for a reason. You didn't have time. You were too stressed. You didn't feel good. So why should putting myself and digging myself a hole on a Wednesday be the correct answer to long-term sustainable success? Guess what, guys? It's not. So when you think about rearranging your schedule and adding things in and you miss a work, I see it all the time, especially on like a Tuesday or Wednesday. You see like Monday or Tuesday workouts get moved to the weekend. I'm like, we already had a pretty hard weekend. Now you're going to add volume? Because what we're always doing is if we're always trying to make things appropriately challenging, and that's how I set it up, that's how your coach sets it up, but that's how you set it up, to make things appropriately challenging. And then you're going to add something on top of it of your own choosing. Now it's gone from appropriately challenging to probably too challenging. And when you apply yourself and you submit yourself to opportunities that are too challenging, that's when you have the chance to have an injury, overtrain, get burnout, be way too stressed, and then see more negative than you see positive. but you're chasing the green, or you're chasing getting the weekly in. But that's, again, it's like there's a method to it, or there should be, to distributing it evenly to where it doesn't feel like it is what it is. But if you move things like that and you adjust your training bed of nails to try and quote unquote fix things or make up things, you're not gonna be able to be as comfortable for as long as you want to, or just not put yourself in a really poor situation.
It's good stuff, man. All right.
That'll wrap it up.
272.
272, Crushing Iron Podcast. If you like us, subscribe, take a listen, give us a review. We would appreciate it. It helps other listeners find us and helps us know that you love us every once in a while. If you want to check us out on crushingiron.com, it is our one-stop shop for all things training camps, triathlon and swim camps. We offer swim analysis, our blog, training and coaching packages, the club membership that we offer, gear, everything. It's all there. Again, crushingiron.com. And if you have any specific questions for Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for me specifically, you can always reach out to me via email at c26coach@gmail.com.
Right on, man. And join our close Facebook group. Search Crushing Iron Group in Facebook, and we'll let you in there. Lots of good conversation. Lots of good stuff coming up.
Lots of good stuff. And hey, we'll check you again next Monday for episode 273.
Happy and healthy training, everybody.
See you next time.
All right, man. Bye.